I want to welcome everybody. This is John Freeman. I am the host tonight of Clean Energy Seminars, a program being sponsored by the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. Normally, Mark Clevey would be our host, but Mark is currently on vacation out of town, so he's asked me to fill in for him. But he'll be back, and he'll be no doubt running the next Clean Energy Seminar. We have a really special program tonight. We're going to be joined by Mr. Loch McCabe. And Loch is, I think many of you might know him. He's been very active in the solar and the renewable energy space for a great number of years. He's currently working with the Centrepolis Accelerator at Lawrence Tech University. And Lawrence Tech at Centrepolis has received a grant from the Michigan Energy Office to do a mapping of renewable energy assets in Michigan. This is an effort to really pinpoint an understanding of all the different businesses that are involved with renewable energy, from manufacturing, from an installation, the whole kit and caboodle. And the idea is, and Loch will explain it much better than I can, is to understand how healthy our system is in Michigan and understand where the gaps are that we may try and fill them over time in order to make the renewable energy industry within Michigan even stronger than it is today. So I'm very pleased to have Loch be speaking tonight. We are being sponsored by the Michigan Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Energy, otherwise known as EGLE. We're also being sponsored by Homeland Solar, McNaughton and McKay, Iron Ridge Racking, and Harvest Solar. And of course, GLREA is a nonprofit organization, and we encourage everybody to join and become a member. Your dues are tax deductible, and the resources go to support our mission to educate and expand renewable energy in Michigan. So with that relatively short introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Loch. He's going to speak for 20, 25 minutes, the usual amount, and then we'll open up for questions and answers. So Loch, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, John. And John and everyone, it's great to see a number of you familiar faces. And I just point out that my colleague and the executive director of the Centrepolis Accelerator, Dan Radonsky, is actually also just joining us on this this event here. Dan, you want to just provide a quick intro to the Centrepolis Accelerator and introduce yourself, and then we'll rock and roll.
Yeah, thanks. And as you can see, I just got back from the airport, so I'm driving, and glad that we were able to be a part of this GLREA event today. So thanks, John and team. For those that are less familiar, Centrepolis Accelerator is a incubator of sorts. It's housed at Lawrence Tech University, but it's actually supported by a number of state agencies, foundations, industry to serve the entire state of Michigan. And our purpose is really to help create more hardware-based clean tech products in the state of Michigan and see that they're designed, engineered, and manufactured here. So what I mean by hardware, that means physical products, advanced materials, advanced manufacturing technologies, whether it's wind, solar, geothermal, batteries, grid-related technologies. Those ideas that are born here for new products, help them design, engineer, and bring them to market. We have in-house design engineering, prototyping capabilities, and have the support of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes Energy, to help support companies throughout the state, not just startups, but established firms that have good ideas. We were supported by EGLE to help support looking at how to break through some of the market barriers and policy issues and supply chain issues to help grow the renewable energy industry, especially for commercial and industrial operations. And we're very grateful to have GLREA support in helping us reach out to membership and understand better their current state of being and, where things could improve to help the industry grow. So thanks for having us today. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Dan. And I don't know how you can talk and drive and look at Zoom all at the same time. But Dan is a remarkable guy, and I think he just demonstrated part of his remarkableness. It's a fun thing that he's coming from. He's coming from Golden, Colorado, and a big NREL event.
Workload. Period. That does not excuse the inability.
Hey Tom, you're on, we can hear you.
To get a call back.
All right, I'll go ahead and pull this up. All right, so let's just dive in. One small adjustment really to the introduction, John, is simply that our focus with this project is pretty much on the commercial and industrial solar side of the equation. And you know, as John and Dan alluded to, the Centrepolis Accelerator has received funding from EGLE to look at the Michigan supply and value chain, particularly as it relates to solar and wind and geothermal assets, and particularly as it connects to enabling commercial and industrial adoption, or rather solar adoption by commercial and industrial companies in the state. And commercial and industrial here actually is somewhat broadly defined. Commercial and industrial would also include municipal government. It could include things like residential developments, multifamily. It also would include agriculture under this broad definition. And so, basically this is at some levels the adoption of solar by buildings, facilities, operations that are bigger than residential. And the whole purpose here is to accelerate it, to make it happen in Michigan much more quickly. And this project really begins by asking the question, who's out there that is directly supporting the success of C&I, commercial and industrial solar today? And what are the barriers? What are the strengths Michigan has? What are some of the opportunities, and what are some of the threats that are potentially at play if we are not successful at creating a lot of C&I solar? And so let me just go ahead. I'm going to speak very quickly. If you have questions and whatnot, please put it in the chat, because it would be much better for us to, work with questions and whatnot as a whole after the presentation. As John mentioned, we're putting together a database, and some of your companies, particularly if they provide support for C&I solar, either are or should be in our database. And then we're also providing recommendations ultimately as to how it is the state of Michigan can better position itself to accelerate adoption by the commercial and industrial sector. Our partners include GLREA. Thank you very much, John. MEIBC, Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council, and then also MGEA, the Michigan Geothermal Energy Associations. And there are 6 tasks we're working from October of last year to September of this year. Data gathering, interviews, which we just completed, putting together the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, conducting an industry survey. So if you supply to the commercial space, industrial space, please let us know, because we want to follow up with some questions. And this will be next month in May. Then we'll be holding some roundtables in June, and then putting our reports. Right now, we're at the SWOT stage of our process here. And just additional things, as part of how we do the SWOT, we are basing the SWOT right now primarily on the industry interviews we have conducted, which we have worked with our partners to figure out who we should talk to. We've done the reach out. We've done the discovery primarily through 1-hour qualitative interviews. And then we're going to continue to do our discovery and improvement in part through this conversation this evening, as well as forums that are going to be happening in June, and a survey that's going to be going out in May. And just real quick, when we did the interviews, what did we ask about? We asked what they're doing, about their suppliers and partners, what it takes to put together a successful commercial and industrial solar project. What causes commercial and industrial projects to fail? What are Michigan's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats at a more of a market level? And then suggestions to increase C&I adoption of solar, wind, and geothermal. And a good chunk of what we're going to be sharing today comes out of the questions around who are your suppliers and partners, and what are the strengths that Michigan has, as well as the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats when it comes to commercial solar. The folks that we interviewed, I think we interviewed 12, CBS Solar, CE Buyers Alliance. So not all these were actually in Michigan. Some of them are out of the state, but are either doing business or want to do business in Michigan. Chart House Energy, DTE, Harvest Solar, Hemlock Semiconductor, Luent Solar Development, Mackinac Power, Loch McCabe, Michigan Solar Systems, Power Home, and Sunrun. I'm sure you can think of some other ones we also would want to interview or connect with. If there are folks that you really think that we should also talk to that could really help us think more effectively about how to accelerate solar in the commercial and industrial space, please put the names or your suggestions down in the chat. And if the answer is call me, let me know who to call and give me your phone number, because we definitely want to hear from you. This is the list of individuals that contributed to the analysis that I'm just about to walk through.
Hey, Locke, if I can, this is Dan again. And, I just want to let anybody know that if you're on this line and you'd like to be interviewed, the process by which we go through this is really confidential. We want companies that are in the value chain, no matter if they're, somewhere in providing supply of renewable energy or install or developing projects or whatever, to be really candid with us on, what's working, what's not working, what could work better. One of the reasons Locke mentioned that we interviewed even companies that are doing renewable project development outside the state is we wanted to see what was working outside of the state as well. And, ultimately this is about providing recommendations on, how we can expand the market and help your businesses grow and help the supply chain grow. So we still have quite a bit of time left here over the next month or two to really work and get more interviews scheduled. So we'd love to have those that are on the line participate to that will. And then we'll also provide, when we might make recommendations, they won't point to specific companies and what they said, right, to protect your confidentiality. But we will provide, at the end of this, some of the data will be made available to anybody that does interview with us, so they have the output of our work, right? Thanks a lot.
No worries, Dan. Thank you. And I appreciate you providing the extra context. I see already in the chat, some of you are saying, call me. Excellent. I'm going to be running pretty quick because I think, John, we have you said 20, but I think we're going to need 30 minutes to do this. I hope that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, let's go. So this is a list of some of the companies that we have in terms of Michigan companies that are part of the solar supply chain: Hemlock Semiconductor, McCabe, D2 Solar, Solar Tilt, Solar Rack, Sinclair, Cone Drive, Traverse, CBS, LG Chem, Fronius, Merson, Rob Roy, Wacker. If there are other companies that are producing products that go into solar systems that can go on commercial and industrial installs, please let us know who else we need to have in our, in our database and on our radar screen. But we see some areas where we have capacity inside the state, and then obviously there's some areas where we don't have capacity, where pretty much all these products are coming from outside of the state. And of course, when it panels and modules, a lot of it's coming from outside of the country as well, or at least has been. And I know a lot's getting reshored or trying to move into the U.S. And there's a whole bunch of issues that some of you may be dealing with right now in terms of challenging supply, particularly on the panels and solar side, panel and module side. Again, if there are folks in Michigan in particular that are part of the supply chain that you know of, that we should know of, please let us know. And then when we get to the value chain, the part of the process which takes the product and then actually gets it onto the roof or into the facility, there's a number of contractors that have CNI activity. a relatively small number of companies, Chart House and Harvest Solar, EcoGiva, that really focus almost 100% on CNI. But then what we're also seeing is that there's quite a few companies that do primarily residential and some CNI and are potentially better, well positioned to do more CNI solar. Again, some of them that rise to the top in terms of who we talk to and what's on our radar screen: Michigan Solar Solutions, Homeland, Powerhouse Solar. But others, and please let us know who else is in the space in Michigan providing commercial and industrial solar systems. When it comes to financing, we know you all can tap Michigan Saves, access PACE financing if you're in the rural area, or an ag operations, USDA funding. What else? What other financial options are there available, particularly for commercial and industrial projects right now, and especially ones that might be available, like located in Michigan? And then, of course, as part of our value chain, we also have our utilities, investor-owned, municipal, and co-ops. And as part of the supply chain, we also have the question of where the workforce comes from. And I'll let you know what we've heard so far. You can tell us what we're missing. When it comes to the quality of the workforce, our understanding is, Michigan has a relatively skilled workforce, but the reality is, as we understand it, is particularly at the technician level, most of that training is done in-house by the solar firms, contractors, and the like. There are a couple of solar-related educational workforce programs. One at Delta College, which actually has a solar PV installation certificate. Kellogg Community, Muskegon Community, each have also relevant certificates. Would love to get your thoughts as to how effective these are. Who are we missing? Is this the right way of thinking about it? Our understanding right now in terms of the workforce is primarily on the job. And if we're wrong about that, or if there really are some other training and educational resources for solar that works and should be better known, please let us know. And then moving forward into the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, I'm going to run through these also fairly quickly. I'm going to be sharing what we heard, and again, the question is, fundamentally, what are we missing? But of course, also, if you heard something from us something from me that is wrong, or just simply not accurate, or as accurate as it should be, again, put it into the chat. Let us know. We're going to have some time to go back and talk it through a little bit more. But let me dive into the strengths. Some of the strengths of Michigan's CNI solar market is that the demand from the CNI sector is real. The underlying demand drivers are improving, and overall, Michigan's pretty well positioned for growth in the commercial and industrial solar arena. And as we dig into these individually a little bit more and focus on, what ways do we know the demand is real? One of them is that large power users are actively asking about solar projects. Both contractors are getting more inquiries, but also DTE's My Green Power program, particularly the one that is geared to service larger users. I mean, they have literally hundreds of companies now that have signed up for their hundreds of industrial and commercial operations that have signed up for their program. Not all of them are getting PV, and that's a whole different issue, but there is demand to even pay a little bit of a premium over existing power rates for solar from Michigan's CNI segment. We're seeing firms specialize in CNI and firms getting more interested in this space from both in Michigan and from out of state. And then we are seeing more residential firms talking about their CNI, primarily commercial as opposed to industrial offerings. All of these, pointing to the demand for this is real. And the drivers are improving. The financial drivers are getting better as more companies go to time of use rates, which will tend to favor solar, especially during warmer summer days. And then overall, Michigan's higher than average electrical prices, the costs, they're high and they're trending up. So the underlying dynamics of putting in solar are improving. Michigan's relatively poor grid reliability, and for those of you who joined late, 20 minutes before 7, our power went out because of this wind. And fortunately, in this case, DTE or someone put it back together within a couple minutes. But anyways, the grid we have isn't the greatest. And then, of course, the ongoing cost reductions of solar. And I know there's a little bit of burps in the market right now related to panel prices in particular, but overall cost reductions have been pretty steady. And then, of course, we have the federal tax credit, which is going to be going down at the end of the year, but may get extended, hopefully will. And then we see also just better strength around some key non-financial drivers, sustainability, having redundancy of power options, and then increased shareholder and customer pressure to reduce carbon, which is particularly important with the Fortune 500 companies and will become increasingly important also for their supply chain. And then Michigan just simply has a well-positioned ecosystem for C&I solar growth. Michigan has a network of PV installers it's a solid network, it's a resilient network. But in addition to having folks that can do the supply, we have a lot of roofs. We have a lot of flat roofs. And one of the things that I hadn't realized is that in the 80s, the code changed and roofs that have been built since the 80s have a 150% capacity factor, safety capacity factor in. So there's a lot more margin now to put solar on roofs today than there would have been a couple decades ago. That plus the reality is that a lot of particularly mid-size and larger C&I facilities, they have electric baseloads that are pretty big and can be readily offset with PV. Obviously these are larger installations, but especially given the distributed generation cap that we have in the state and whatnot, you can put in systems to offset a fair amount of the base load of C&I and still have room to grow. And then the other thing that's really interesting is going to be the play out of batteries and solar and how batteries are going to start accelerating PV build out. And that will be true at the residential level, but it will also be true particularly in the commercial arena. And what we're hearing from you and your peers is already, the Teslas, the Ford Lightnings, and the batteries that go with those systems are starting to change not only the demand for batteries, but also the demand for solar to power those batteries. And then I also heard that if you have a battery and a solar system, you can extend that tax credit to the battery side, which of course then would reduce the cost of the battery system. So we have some real good strengths, but we're also struggling with a bunch of weaknesses there's a reason why C&I solar in the state is still very small. And at the end of the day, the demand is really pretty nascent. It's also true that in Michigan, if you're a commercial and industrial operation, your options are, in terms of how you buy solar, they're pretty limited. We have distributed generation interconnection caps that hamper the ability to put in larger systems economically. We have tariff rates that are not as economically favorable as they could be and arguably should be. And then also, companies that are putting in C&I systems just have a slug of interconnection, permitting, taxation, siting, and other challenges, which all go to raising costs and slowing projects down. And it's challenging enough in the residential space, but in commercial industrial, if you're raising costs and slowing projects down, you're actively killing a larger and larger portion of them. So let's just dig into each of those a little bit more. In terms of nascent, I thought it was very informative. One of the folks we worked with is quite familiar with commercial. He said, commercial is now where residential was 10 years ago in terms of maturation. In other words, it is still very early. It takes a lot of hand-holding, a lot of education. And contractors today in the C&I space, they do a lot more quoting than they do actual installing, because often the conversations stall between the CEO and the accountant. And so this is playing out to in the C&I space, and it speaks at least in part to this being a broadly young and unfamiliar marketplace for a lot of decision makers. And then when they get to figuring out what options are available, they're limited. I mean, basically, they can buy RECs, and they can either purchase those RECs on the open market, or if they're in DTE territory, they can buy RECs essentially through the My Green Power program. There isn't a similar option in the consumer's territory. So that's one option, is to buy RECs if you don't want to have the solar at your location. The other one is to go ahead and install distributed behind the meter PV, and that's what we're largely going to focus on. And I know that's GLREA's membership. But you got to work with a firm that can do this and can actually pull it off. And you're really limited because of the regs in the state to where you can put that PV. It's got to be really at the location load. And we can't really, in the state, C&I companies can't put solar on other properties that are away from the load, with an exception or two, but generally not. And then you don't have the option right now to buy into independent solar farms because we don't allow them in this state. So that's a challenge, limited options. And then when you get down to for working in particular with distributed generation, you run up right against the caps. DTE for voluntary 3% for consumers. And you guys know this, inside and out. The caps themselves are split down. So really only about a quarter of the cap itself is really eligible for commercial and industrial. And really there it's commercial, between 20 and 150 kilowatt systems. And then we have a whole rate structure, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a sec. But the gist of it is that you really can only get a retail rate if your distributed generation is simultaneously offsetting your load. Hence if you're going to design load, at least design it to cover base load. And these caps, just build in a whole lot of uncertainty that makes it really hard for companies to put in large scale PV generation systems. Because DTE's My Green Power is not a distributed generation program. It's a utility scale solar. It's exempted from the caps. And Michigan is the only state that has this overall distributed generation cap. So that makes Michigan less comfortable for out-of-state companies and makes it harder for companies in the state to succeed. And then you've got tariffs, which are pretty much designed to make PV less economical. If your system is below 150 kilowatt, you get 8 to 10 cents rather than retail. If it's above 150 kilowatt, you get locational marginal pricing rates, which typically 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. That is not designed to make solar pay off in a timely manner. Both the caps and the rates are not the norm, more restrictive in both of those areas compared to other states. And basically what this means is C&I solar projects in Michigan are going to be undersized, and they're going to be sort of framed in such a way that everyone knows that you're not getting a lot of money for the power, which basically means also you're not going to have projects going as quickly as they might. And then this becomes even more challenging for municipal governments that don't have access to the tax breaks. So in Michigan, it is hard to make the ROI work really favorably when it comes to solar in a lot of instances. And then you add into that additional costs to actually, connect the solar in terms of interconnection studies, and even for small projects. Studies are time consuming, they're expensive, the utilities can delay them. DTE is particularly notorious at this. and DTE studies routinely significantly delay the timing of CNI projects. Consumers is better, but still, and solar contractors in this space, don't have a lot of recourse to address interconnection delays, except for simply to complain to the Public Service Commission, which is challenging. And then you add in additional local permitting and taxation issues. You all have probably dealt with these the challenges. Every locality is its own kingdom when it comes to permitting, and so you can be planning to go one way and then have the township and the municipality go the other way. Townships and municipalities are raising fees for no apparent reason except for that they can. And then when it comes to taxation, in particular, real property tax, small CNI projects are exempt when the properties have real property of less than $80,000, which means they're going to be smaller commercial operations. And then if the property owner has real property in excess of 80,000, then they're not exempt. And so so that means then they're going to be paying taxes on their systems, and every municipality has their own tax scheme, and this is inconsistent, and again makes it really, really hard to put together projects on a consistent and predictable way. And then these siting issues have not only challenged distributed generation CNI operators, but it's challenged my green power program itself. And more than one utility scale solar project has been canceled because of local opposition. So it's not just this is an issue statewide. And then just another siting thing that came up late in the research. Apparently, DTE in some jurisdictions are now going in and requiring that they complete special paperwork for DTE, which of course just makes local municipalities, upset and increases costs and more delays. So these are challenges, and then you add in additional challenges. We can't aggregate across meters in different locations. We have rising labor rates. We have potential moves to apply minimum fixed charges to solar. And there's a whole other sort of side story there. And then one of the folks we talked with basically said, and there's climate change. And, one of you was mentioning about wind earlier. The climate analysis are based upon charts that were put together 25 years ago. But things are probably different now and are going to change even more over the next 25 years. So how is that all going to play out? So these are all things that make it harder to be successful in the CNI space in Michigan. But, there really are some opportunities if we can figure our way through this. One is that, being successful with commercial and industrial solar on a big scale will really go a long ways towards helping Michigan meet its carbon reduction goals, and will accelerate the path to electrifications. And, if we dig in a little bit more, roughly two-thirds of Michigan's electrical consumption is in the commercial and industrial sector. So large-scale CNI solar is key to achieving significant carbon reduction and elimination. I mean, we gotta be successful in this space, in this sector, in order to achieve overall significant carbon reductions. And the good news is that a lot of the grid issues that come along with significant electrification that's needed to meet the carbon reduction goals, those grid challenges are going to be mitigated to some degree as distributed generated CNI solar is scaled up. And when thinking about carbon reduction, we have to be thinking about this electrification, and the part of understanding how to do this better will include doing some serious long-term modeling and of the electrification process over a 30, 50-year time frame. build in the rise of EVs and batteries, and then also really put in a true value of solar. And there have been some studies in some states that have suggested that the true value of solar, which is inclusive of not only the energy generated, but also the grid benefits of having distributed solar, actually will exceed the value of retail. And wouldn't that be wonderful? Because that would truly change some of the financial dynamics for C&I solar in this state. And we're facing a number of threats. If we don't do this, we're going to create unnecessary stress for Michigan's grid. That's going to lead to higher than otherwise electric power rates. We're going to miss decarbonization goals, and overall, we're going to have a weaker solar ecosystem. And well, at this point, we'll just wrap up here because but we know EVs are coming. We know batteries are coming. The grid is going to get fragmented more and more, and also the electrical demands on the grid are going to increase. DG is key to being able to bridge those challenges more effectively. If we don't do more DG, we're going to struggle more. And fundamentally, because what distributed generation does is it reduces the local need to draw from the grid. It makes the grid operate more effectively in local areas. It flattens out peak loads, and you then begin combining PV and batteries. And this really can go a long ways towards enhancing stability and reliability, which we will need going forward. And to the degree we don't do this, we will be experiencing higher than otherwise electric power rates, which actually is okay for solar because solar benefits as electric rates go up, but it doesn't really favor us all as a broader community because our grid already is expensive, and without more DG, it will become more expensive. And this reduces our overall competitiveness in the consumer and industrial space because basically higher electric rates make Michigan less attractive, less competitive overall. And, obviously we would be missing our decarbonization goals. And right now the utilities, as I understand it, are planning for us not to hit decarbonization goals without a lot of fossil fuel, but they are not dialing in significant C&I solar in their analysis, as I understand it. And that's a missed opportunity that it's important for us to be able to, at least bring attention to and hopefully address. And then finally, if the opportunities aren't in Michigan, the ecosystem isn't going to stay here. It's going to go to other states that have much more favorable policies and practices, and there are a growing number of them. And so, we started this saying that Michigan has a strength in the local ecosystem, but you all will go where the market is, and if the market's not here, that is a threat for Michigan. Really appreciate your patience as I've ran through this. John, I'll turn it back to you. My key questions is this analysis basically on point? What's your additional feedback and questions, and any other suggestions you have to accelerate commercial industrial solar adoption here in Michigan?
Well, thank you, Loch. Great presentation, very thorough. And I want to remind people, if you're not asking a question, please go on mute. There's a lot of background noise, which is inappropriate. So maybe, Loch, you could close out your presentation so we could see everybody, and then we can open up for questions and answers. I know there's going to be a lot of questions and follow-up questions. So who wants to begin first?
I want to ask Tom. Tom, are we on track here? Tom Stanton. Sorry, John.
Yes and no. There's 100 more dimensions that we should talk about. But, on the whole, this is a very good start. It's very important that this analysis takes place.
All right. Well, if I got the general thumbs up from Tom, I know I'm at least going in the right direction.
Right. Other questions or comments?
I think Vince has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Vince.
Thanks for the presentation. Very good. Great to hear all the good information.
Oh, there we go.
I had a question about, since I'm in Ann Arbor, what the University of Michigan is doing to help this effort. I don't hear much from them, and I'm curious what your position or opinion is on that.
That's accessory. Yeah, that's accessory breathing.
Remember to go on mute if you're not speaking. Go ahead,
You know,
Mark.
Vince, it's an important question. I don't know. We didn't hear anything related to University of Michigan. I suspect some of you may be aware, but I don't know.
Well, ironically enough, last Thursday, we had two students from Students for Clean Energy who have been trying to nudge the University of Michigan to accelerate their efforts to transition to renewable energy. And they've had it over the last 4 years. They're seniors now. They've had a mixed experience in working with the university. It sounds, in general, it sounds like the university understands it, that they have to get with it on paper, but it's the actual implementation that they're a little slow on the uptake. And so we're going to have to keep nudging University of Michigan as well. Fortunately, the University of Michigan is located in Ann Arbor. And we know from our friends in Ann Arbor that they're very interested in accelerating the transition to renewable energy to fight climate change and to save money. So I think that's going to put some pressure on University of Michigan, in addition to the student body, but more pressure from the local unit of government as well. John Sarver, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Dan. I was going to just step in for a second, John, and point out that, you know, it depends on what we say. What is your University of Michigan doing to either support the industry or adopt it in their own university buildings? But I do want to point out that the Michigan State University was recently awarded as an industrial assessment center. For those that don't know, and a lot of people still do not know this, they're just kicking off the program. And it's a program that the Department of Energy launched a long time ago. And we used to have an industrial assessment center at the University of Michigan, and that dissolved some time ago. And what the industrial assessment centers do is they're funded by the Department of Energy through the Advanced Manufacturing Office to provide free energy audits for industrial kind of mid-sized manufacturers. So not for the big companies, because the big companies generally have their own teams that are doing that. I can send some information to you, John, that you could forward to your membership. But it's a great way to get a free assessment of kind of current energy use and energy efficiency opportunities. Now, they're not just going to be looking at renewables, of course. They're going to be looking at energy efficiency, HVAC, weatherization. But I just want to make sure that people are aware of that new asset.
Sounds great, Dan. Thank you. John Sarver's got a question.
Yeah, you know, we've been hearing that there's significant interest in the residential market for batteries and backup power. And I'm wondering, Locke, if you're hearing anything with respect to the commercial and industrial sector, that there's an interest in batteries, either for backup power or maybe to manage demand charges.
Yeah, it's a good question, John. You know, when talking about batteries, it almost all revolved around the residential sector. That you know, the impression I get is when it comes to commercial and industrial, particularly industrial, you know, they have, if they have other backup systems, you know, they've got other backup systems. You know, essentially they're already not relying on batteries for backup. The exception to this is I've heard some folks talk about smaller applications and batteries, say around you know, server units, you know, pieces of their infrastructure which cannot go down under any circumstance, and you wouldn't be putting in you know, a natural gas generator, you know, for backup. So smaller backup systems. There seem to be, you know, my sense is there's potentially some value to some demand there, but it's not I didn't see or hear anything that told me that there's a sort of drivers in the way that folks that are buying Teslas and F-150 Lightnings are starting to think about, well, you know, let's put a battery in our house and we'll get even more, you know, bang for the buck, as it were.
Lee, Andre? Lee, you're on mute.
The question is about chairman of the Energy Committee in the House from Monroe County, is now going to run for the Senate. Do we have ways of interviewing these people and ask them for their stance on things that we care about, the things that you talked about that are inhibiting commercial and industrial? And can we get them to reveal their true colors, or is it just going to let the politicians talk about what things that they want to talk about? The fact that community solar has been in his committee for so long, and now he's going to extend his stay in Lansing in the Senate, doesn't play very well with me. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't play well with GLREA either. And in fact, we are developing a political action committee that will be a new part of GLREA. It'll be a separate part for legal reasons, but it'll be associated with our organization. And we're doing this because we realize that we need to support legislators that are people that are running for the legislature that support our issues. One of the problems is that both DTE and consumers spend a ton of money in Lansing, both giving campaign contributions as well as lobbying, and that carries a lot of clout, unfortunately. So we need to fight fire, and so you'll be hearing more about this new development the next several weeks. Forrest Cohn's got a question.
Yeah, sorry, not to backtrack to the U of M stuff, but U of M actually has a request for proposals out right now, due on the 22nd, asking for up to 100% renewable generation for 3 campuses, Dearborn, Flint, and Michigan. So it's something that my organization, Utopian Power, is working on presenting something to them, but not sure exactly how they're looking to achieve it because they don't have the space behind meter, and there's some difficulties with virtual PPAs in Michigan. So that's something they're looking to do right now. And I did speak with Michigan Energy Options on that, and they had mentioned that maybe they're trying to at least push DTE and consumers to say, hey, this is something we want to do, and even if there's not a program in place for it now, to show that they're serious about it and get it going. And so they are taking proposals from basically as small as you want to 100% of, which is about, if you're doing strictly solar, it's about 105 or megawatts, something like that. So it's a decent amount, but anyways, it's something they got going on now, and it was actually supposed to be due, I think, tomorrow, but they pushed it back a week.
Great. That's great. Thanks, Forrest. Good to know.
That's encouraging. Other questions or comments for Locke or Dan? Yes, go ahead, Ken.
So did you guys look at any segments that were more favorable for short-term conversion for C&I into solar? And I was just thinking examples like relatively local delivery, meaning less than 150 miles. So things like Amazon Prime, the warehouses they have in Michigan, and a dozen other types of services out there.
Yeah, it's a good question, Ken. We at this stage of the game, we've talked primarily to the providers of C&I solar, not to the potential buyers. So I don't have any particular visibility on that. Dan, though, might, because there's another project that, Dan, you're involved with U of M that looks a little bit more on the demand side. So why don't you speak to that, please?
Yeah, and I think when EGLE thought about this, a lot of this is supporting their Council on Climate Solutions efforts, as some of you guys are involved in. They wanted to kind of separately interview the supply side, which is what our project's about, talking to those that are providing solar, wind, geothermal solutions to the commercial industrial sector, anyone that's in the supply chain, value chain. That's our job, right? Supply side. Then there's another project that is led by the University of Michigan's Economic Growth Institute that is looking at the demand side. So actually interviewing, for some reason, they didn't interview commercial building, just industrial building. And I think there were some reasons for that. So all the interviews have been with manufacturers, big and small, especially medium-sized manufacturers, trying to understand what would really make a difference in them, committing to adding solar or wind or geothermal to their operations. So that's still very much a work in progress. And what I'd love to do is, as that project gets to the point kind of where we're at, where it has some findings from early interviews, is make sure that you guys are informed as well and can provide input and feedback and advice to us from that effort as well. But at the highest level, one thing I will say is obviously the big companies have gone very far with measures, and not only adopting renewables, they provided some really unique insights that are in line with what Loch has already captured, of course, including frustrations. And they have, the medium-sized manufacturers have done little to nothing, with the exception of a few very patient and companies that really wanted to see it happen, right? So.
Thanks, Dan. We got a question from Gunnar. Am I pronouncing your first name correctly?
Yeah, Gunnar.
Great.
That was mainly my question. I was curious about what the accelerator does on the demand side. A lot of the issues you pointed out in the presentation, which was great. Thank you. It was super informative. It seemed to be policy related. So I know the GLREA and others are attacking on that front. But there's a lot of hand holding. There's a lot of, I like that quoting, not installing comment. We're small and we do mostly residential, but at the company I work for, but we're starting to look at it more in the commercial, and it's, there's these 20-page OSHA requirements and there's all these other things that go through, and it just gets kind of arduous sometimes. So, but yeah, I think from the demand side, but I think it was mostly just answered just now. So thank you.
Gunnar, what's the company you work with?
Strawberry Solar. We're based in Detroit.
Okay. I mean, I will say that one of the things that it impressed me, I think, very favorably, is that the companies like Harvest and Charthouse that have really do solar, they have figured out, do commercial and industrial, they have figured out how to do it. They have figured out a formula that enables them to overcome or work through and overcome, the whole host of challenges that are present. And I think part of the trick will be, let's say, and each of them or both of them sort of specialize to some degree. So as you're looking at commercial, you may find that instead of tackling the whole sector, that there may be an angle or two that you can figure out how to go after more readily, and hopefully have a little more success by being focused on coming up with higher probability solution sets for particular commercial or industrial types.
Yeah, because we are getting interest, way more. I mean, unsolicited interest from larger projects that we normally wouldn't tackle. And we started looking into them, and then we ended up failing a lot. And so we have to kind of pump the brakes a little bit now. So.
One of the interesting things that's also happening in Michigan is that a lot of cities now are developing sustainability plans. And Eric Shannon just mentioned in the chat that Southfield is in the process of doing this. And I think as cities do this, that's going to be supportive of local solar companies to help promote solar for commercial industrial businesses within those cities. And so I think that's a very encouraging thing. I don't exactly know where Detroit is. It's obviously a large city, but I know that one of our members, Diane Van Buren, and Kendall Coonan, our president, has been working to help push the city to develop a sustainability plan for the city of Detroit, which I think would be great. The other thing I want to mention, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other Diane at D2 used to work at Strawberry Solar on the side.
Diane Checkledge. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's great. She is.
And the other thing I just want to mention is another element in the background of all this is that the Governor Whitmer is going to be coming out with her finalized Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. There is a draft that's been out for a couple months, and they've been circulating it and getting feedback. The final copy is going to be released a week from tomorrow. And this is a long-term plan to decarbonize the economy in Michigan. And so this is going to create a backdrop of pressure on the utilities and the legislature to start passing more policies that will help to meet these goals. And so that will provide an organizing handle for GLREA and for our ally organizations to be able to put more pressure on the utilities and legislators to do the right thing. Let's go back to Vince. We got a couple more minutes for a few more questions. Vince, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment about, people don't know this maybe, that the city of Ann Arbor is pushing hard, well, the residents are at least pushing hard for microgrid development in the city of Ann Arbor, which is allowed by the Constitution, surprisingly. So that could add some effort, like you were talking about, to promote, renewables.
Well, Vince, you're right and you're not right. Ann Arbor has to create its own municipal utility, a sustainable energy utility, they're calling it, in order to get around some of the state barriers. If Ann Arbor doesn't do that, then they're not going to be able to do microgrids. In fact, there was another bill that got one hearing, I think a year and a half ago, in, I think, the House Energy Committee, even prior to Joe Bellino. And the utilities, once again, DTE and consumers are totally opposed to it, and it hasn't seen another hearing since then. And so that's why what Ann Arbor is looking to do is create their own kind of parallel utility to work in parallel with DTE is really fascinating, because as a utility, they then can circumvent a number of these barriers that currently are causing a problem. And so we're hoping that if Ann Arbor is successful, then lots of other communities with Michigan could go down that same road, because it's just exactly what you said, Vince. It is allowed by the Constitution to create your own municipal utility. Lee, you got the final question or comment? You're on mute, Lee.
There's 42 municipal power systems in Michigan. And so those guys should be able to use some of these ideas. So thank you very much. But the idea of agglomerating or virtual metering is what the cities need, because they have lots of meters and they have spaces that don't have space, but they have other spaces that do have space. My town is talking about building a new school, but all the other schools aren't good for solar because of the way the roofs are or the way the building is built. And if they build this new school, they can only use power there in that building, and the rest of them still have to be stuck in the past. So I put in the chat the idea of getting the Public Service Commission to say, we will allow virtual metering for hospitals, municipalities, public service agencies, and that would be a way to get the camel's foot inside the tent so we can start to see how this could work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Locke, do you have any final comment, or Dan, a final comment before we sign off for the evening?
My final comment is really, first of all, thank you all for making this time available. I hope this is exciting for you. It certainly is exciting for me to think about the possibilities here. I've loved the chat and some of the suggestions of things that we haven't looked at fully yet. And I'm going to be following up with a couple of you on these. And ultimately, it's going to take a community to make this happen. And, just very much appreciate the work that GLREA has done for many years. The Political Action Committee, sounds directly on point. And, as we break these barriers down bit by bit, there's a lot of upside, which is good.
Yeah, I agree. And actually timing's right, as you all know. I think the, not just that the state's committed to this and their climate for Council for Climate Solutions is coming with final recommendations. This project and report will feed into it, which is great. But if you're keeping track of the infrastructure spending and some of the other bills that are being reviewed at the House or Senate level, a lot of it is committed to decarbonization of commercial and industrial buildings. There's actually a $4 billion bill that's passed the House that I'm glad to pass along for those that are not familiar. And it's going to be entirely dedicated to decarbonizing the C&I sector. So what that means is the DOE will release that to individual state energy programs. Ours is EGLE, and they will have the opportunity to have special programs. Those can be incentives and other things that would come directly in line with the recommendations we all end up making. So it may take a while for those things to trigger into actual, RFPs or proposals or funding, of course, but just want to make sure that everybody recognizes that's on the horizon for us. So
that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much to both Loch and Dan for joining us tonight and making this wonderful presentation. Speaking on behalf of the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, we're very happy to be a partner in this project and really pleased to be able to contribute to this very important work. So I want to thank our sponsors again this evening: EGLE, Harvest Energy, Homeland Solar, McNaughton McKay, Iron Ridge Racking. And of course, I want to thank all the GLREA members that have joined us tonight. And if you're not a member, I would encourage all of you to join. So thank you very much. Look for our next seminar next Thursday. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.